All right, so we were talking about nuclear. I just want to emphasize a couple things on this one. I don't have a personal grudge against nuclear. I wish that it had worked out for our society. You saw the boondoggle with the whoops, the Washington Public Power Supply System. One of the problems with nuclear is it's simply really, really expensive per kilowatt hour. In fact, we're going to give you some comparisons here in a bit on that. Again, though, the other problem is it takes so long to build a plant that by the time you get the plant done, the market conditions have changed so much. Investors are real reluctant to go out on a limb, so the federal government or the taxpayer in the end ends up kind of supporting this, or the ratepayer, as we saw with the whole boondoggle in the Pacific Northwest, where they were building multiple nuclear plants going back. So I just don't see it has a future. In fact, there was the Trojan plant up on the Columbia River up north of Vancouver, near not just south of Longview a little bit, was taken out. I can't remember when that was now. Maybe 2006 maybe. So don't see a future there for nuclear in the Pacific Northwest. For those kind of reasons. Even though it would be a low carbon way to go, other than the concrete costs, you really don't have a huge amount of carbon emissions, even related to the mining. It's pretty minuscule. All right. So moving then to the next one, conservation. Okay. So instead of trying to produce more electricity, why don't we use the electricity we have more efficiently? And so, in fact, we are doing that to some degree. And there's been efforts to do that with home energy use. Probably the most famous example is the light bulb, which are used not just in homes, of course, going from incandescent to fluorescent to LED. And those are getting better quality all the time and cheaper. There's also appliances. The Energy Star appliance designation tells you have a more energy efficient machine. So you can save a lot of energy and therefore money using those. They have, advantages for us. They don't seem to last as long, or I'm not sure if that's because they're efficient or because they are just made with lower quality engineering and materials. I'm not sure. But in any case, yes, conservation. So more fuel efficient vehicles would be another example. And so there's always a tug of war. The oil industry, of course, always lobbies against fuel efficiency because they want to sell more oil. The auto industry usually teams up with the oil industry to do that. Understandably, they don't want to have to go into the kind of somewhat more risky who's going to have the best market share with the more efficient vehicles, and there's some R&D involved, all of that kind of thing. But I saw, for example, with diesel pickup trucks, they actually got less efficient over time in the past decades, worse fuel economy rather than better. They were putting it more into just power rather than efficiency. But I remember as a kid in the farming business, my dad had one that could pull a trailer with fruit on it on the highway and could get 23, 24, 25 miles per gallon with the Cummins diesel. So, conservation, efficiency, the related concepts. And it can be done quickly in that, at least in areas where you have some replaceable user of fuel. It doesn't take the 10 years to make, say, a nuke plant or a big coal plant or whatever, okay? So conservation isn't polluting, and it can be the lowest cost way to meet energy needs. It often is. There's been tons of studies on that, where instead of building new power plants, you just build in efficiency and use it as a payoff of much shorter time frames. So we also, by the way, another example would be like the furnaces in homes and air conditioners have higher standards, meaning that they use less energy for the amount of cooling or heating. Now, cons, Jevons paradox is the most famous example. It goes back to when coal over a century ago was getting cheaper. It was noted by Jevons that in Great Britain, as electricity got cheaper, uh, people just used more of it. Do we do that? Yeah, another example. Uh, Here's one for you. When you went from those incandescent bulbs to the more efficient LEDs, did you kind of leave the lights on a little longer than you would have normally? Because after all, it's not really costing you much. Have you ever done that one? Yeah, so those are examples of Jevons paradox. When we become more efficient, we don't necessarily use less energy. We might use the services more that energy provides. Another case in point might be the more fuel efficient vehicle. Are you more likely to go on that longer weekend road trip because you've got it? Okay, that sort of thing. Okay, I'm back. I just took a little pause there. I've had my own, speaking of efficiency, I'm in my utility room in the basement of my house, and I've got one of these tankless water heaters. And when anybody turns on a hot water valve in the house, it makes a noise. And you can probably still hear it a little bit, but it's kind of cool because I don't have a tank, so I don't have any energy loss uh, from having water heated and just sitting there. All right. So Jevons paradox means that even if we become more efficient for a particular use, we may take that money that we save and either do more of that use or go spend the money on something else that requires energy to do. So it's not quite as easy as we think to save energy, but still there are some net gains in society. We're seeing some progress over the years, and in fact, uh, it's worth continuing to do. Just knowing though that we may not save as much energy as we think we're saving. All right, so continuing on with the non-hydro renewables, um, biomass. Well, things like wood and waste can be used to fire plants that make electricity. Um, Biodiesel is an example of biomass. You can use, say, canola oil to make it, or a number of other feedstocks. Ethanol. Here in the Northwest, yeah, we could grow corn, but it's not very efficient to grow it here compared with the Midwest. Partly because we have lower humidities here. It's more stressful for corn plants here. They don't yield as much typically. And the probably the most promising path for us to have a big ethanol industry here in the Northwest is to grow poplar trees. The genetics have been sequenced. There's some really interesting stuff going on in this. But I've been talking about this for 20 years almost in this class. That hey, maybe someday we'll see these huge poplar plantations around, and then we'll be making ethanol out of that. The wood there, the cellulose, basically it's a cellulosic ethanol, it's called. But we don't have a cost-effective approach still after so long. I'm not optimistic on that one. Okay, and algae is another one, making algae fuels by using photosynthesis. These are all kind of solar-based biomass, in other words, photosynthetic kinds of approaches. The biggest problem is it takes a lot of land with most of those systems, and you still have to refine, you have to still produce the fuels, and we're not cost effective at it yet. And I don't know if we ever will be, especially when you compare with what we're now doing with electrics. There's some dazzling stuff that goes on for automotive transport. We're going to get to that soon here. All right, so wind. So wind is, I'm going to switch over now and go to, you have this stuff in your Moodle site. So let's go to that. I'm just going to take you there right now. So here's the week 7, the energy system. Oh, it wants me to save something. I better save that or I'm going to lose it, huh? So sorry for the little delay here. Wasting your time, aren't I? All right. So let's do the wind. So we've looked at these before. So this is not a new map. You've looked at it. I don't think I looked at it with you. I'm not really sure if I remember doing that with you or not. But let's have a peek at this thing. Pretty amazing stuff here. Look at this. Um, so if you go in here and then you go down to, actually, a lot of these different maps are pretty useful. They give us, I think 60 meters fine. There was 80, 100, whatever. The patterns are roughly the same. Higher, remember, the concept is the higher you get over the ground, the more wind there is. So therefore, the greater wind power can be harnessed with very tall turbines and very long uh, uh, blades that turn in the wind. And so the story here is, if you look at the Pacific Northwest land area, we've got some hot spots. I mean, clearly, I mean, if you kind of move up here and then run up to a region, we're not bad. We're not bad, but um, look at the colors over now. These ridge tops, generally speaking, aren't the places where we're going to do it because it's really expensive to build infrastructure up there. But look at these vast areas of the Great Plains, just incredible wind. Those we have some spots right down in the gorge. Then you got the Yakima Valley. This is the Kittitas Valley in Washington. Kittitas Valley is the biggest wind development area, along with the Horsehaven Hills down here in kind of southeast Washington State. It used to be the largest wind farm in the world was built right in here. It wasn't because it was the windiest place, but it was more about the progressive politics of the Northwest rather than the Great Plains. But what happened in the Great Plains was the wind energy industry got more and more efficient, and it really just made economic sense. And so it's kind of an interesting thing. Republican states are the ones that have the most wind energy. For those of you who maybe weren't aware of that, they're harnessing the most. They have the most wind farm capacity, and it's simply because it makes economic sense nowadays. Okay, and we'll show you why in a bit, why that's happened. But the real story that we gave you the other day about the Northwest isn't so much that, yeah, well, we do have some real good windy valleys, and North Central Oregon's pretty good, all of that. But of course, you keep looking off the coast there. See, you're looking over there on the coast, aren't you? Yeah. So that area, especially Southern Oregon, Northern California, it's really, really, really windy in these areas. In fact, the wind is so strong there in the spring into the summer and early fall that doesn't blow every day, but generally it does. The upwelling is strong there. It's so strong that, in fact, the kelp forest collapse we looked at happened last year because the water stayed so cool in here and gave the whole ecosystem some protection. But it did finally collapse in 2018, 2019, unfortunately. But it was the most resilient of all of the Pacific Northwest. Anyway, so this is where the big potential is for wind offshore. You can probably do a little paper on that if any of you are interested in exploring that. There's some stuff on offshore wind in Oregon. It's the estimates of producing it out there are getting cheaper and cheaper as it's really an amazing resource. It's about as good as any resource anywhere in the country you can see. Pretty good off the coast of the east too, but look at those dark colors there. Wow, it's really, really windy out there. Okay. You'd have to build offshore platforms because the continental shelf drops off real quickly. These are shallow coasts on the east coast, so this is where the recent development's been happening. But the leaders in this are in the North Sea in Europe. They're way, way, way ahead of us, and some of that is just because the North Sea is very shallow and it's much easier to build wind farms out there. The Pacific coast is anything but Pacific. I mean, this is a severe place. You can have very tall waves, very extreme winds. So I think someday we're going to see some big wind farms out here. They're kind of in the planning stages now. All right. So going back to our notes on that. So let's see. I think I lost you. Close this out. What happened here? And yeah, kind of nothing's going on there. I haven't found nobody even listening to me.